different seasons. And those seasons include just getting older, experiencing relationships, experiencing grief as our extended family members are going through different things. So again, we've created a sisterhood as an outgrowth, as a direct outgrowth of our experience as group members. You know, as she stated, from the age of 5, and I can't even. We were both born, so to speak, in the church, and so um, I don't even remember. You know, there is no before or after. It was just us as a group, and it was just the church. Um, I think too. I know some of the questions within this is like, not only is there is there a sisterhood that has come up from this, but also what other um, connections have we kept, and what new things have we sort of moved into. We also outside of, we're looking at it, and we're always kind of checking on each other, but also, hey, what happened to such and such? Had you heard this? Using this other social media connection, um, check on this person. So we're, that sisterhood again is just sort of ongoing, and we learn some of those staple uh, uh, practices from our time in the church. Um, and I've loved just being able to have that stability in my life, to have that sister group that I can just always, hey, they always kind of know, have your back, and know that, oh, we had this commonality of growing up together, and so there's nothing off the table in terms of what we can relate to, um, and be able to prop each other up behind. Um, I know a portion of the questions too is like, pros and cons, and I talked a lot about the pros. um, I think if you're thinking about, it's hard to sort of really recognize um, um, cons, because for some of us, like myself, I didn't have a biological sister, and so to have this network of sisters to go through life with has been really nice. Um, it's taught me how to actually be a sister, how to be a friend, a confidant, an advocate. Um, it's taught me how to be resourceful and be empathetic. It just has taught me so many things about how to be a sister, which I wouldn't have received because I don't have a biological sister. I have a younger brother, and it's totally different relating to a brother, and family dynamics of a brother, older brother, younger sister. I'm sorry, older sister, younger brother in a family. Totally different from, again, having ladies that are exactly your age, had your exact experience,
Exact
plus
same
some
hairstyle
other
and all.
things peppered into it. You were saying something, Yasha? I'm
I
sorry.
was saying we've had the exact same hairstyle, exact same clothes,
Absolutely. Going through all the trends
right?
together.
Liking the same boys, not us specifically, but it was to me, it was that sisterhood, it was that friendship that I have not been able to replicate a lot outside of the church. It's
Absolutely. I
it's very
agree.
hard for me to make that close friendship, that sisterhood outside of this. Yeah, that's it. Um,
Um,
mhm.
what other questions did you have, or what didn't I answer?
Yeah, I think that was it. I think it was, we've had that dynamic because we grew up together. We've shared, like you said, a lot together, but then also we were in a specific region of Houston. And then I believe Tanu, I don't know if Tanu was on actually, but we could also speak to, even when we would go to summer camp, like just building that friendships in other regions, and it's not just becoming friends. Sometimes that friend will become like your sister as well. I don't know if Malika want to join in?
Sure. So I grew up in Shrine Nine and with Tanu, and she's not on the call yet, but and I'll probably repeat it when she gets on. But I remember the very first time I met her, and it was us cleaning up the nursery. And I was like, who is this hardworking, disciplined, respectful sister? And that's just who she is. Like she's just always been, she's probably working another job right now because like Tanu's just always been that diligent. And I feel like growing up in the shrine, we've already kind of covered, I think, a lot of what I'm going to say, but I think a part of growing up in the shrine is just also having an understanding of sisterhood outside of the church walls, outside of Akiba land, because I just love our people. Like I care about my sisters beyond, you know, this institution. And I think growing up in a community where we're taught not just self-love, where we're taught to challenge the, you know, acceptance of Black inferiority, we're also taught that Black people overall, we have value. And so for me, I feel like that allowed me to just have grace, because there's always so many stereotypes about Black women not getting along. And I honestly, like, I can maybe count on one hand and maybe less than that, me being in Black spaces and spaces with like going on group trips where it was like bad vibes, you know? And I think you kind of develop a worldview where you attract and you are drawn to other positive Black women. And so I think that was a lesson that I took out of growing up in the shrine. And I didn't grow up in Mtoto House, but I spent my summers in Mtoto House, you know, or YTG retreats, or, you know, numerous summer camps, or just spending time on Beulah land. And because of even the relatively limited experience with that, like, you know, those really are my sisters. And I moved away from Atlanta for a while, but they're still family. The group that I grew up with, Maya, Tanu, Zalika, like we're still family. Like we went on a trip last year, we're about to go on another trip. You know, we celebrated milestones together. So even if months and years can go by, it's like, okay, this is my sister, I'm gonna show up for her. Right. And I think that's like been such a valuable experience, and just really there's nothing like it. I mean, there might be something like it. I don't, you know, I'm not.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I'm not omnipotent, but there can't be that much like it.
So I will say, I do want to bring in the conversation, Abanesta, who was one of our first Mia Faida, our house parent, who has shaped a lot of who we both are tremendously. And then also bring in Anika Tanae to talk about the dynamic of, you know, like being a teenager in the shrine and sisterhood. And then also speaking to raising women in the shrine who are not your own child, you know, and navigating that field of probably, I think it was like 6 or 7 sisters.
8. It was 8, yeah.
You know.
I don't think I was your first house parent, because my first house parent experience was with Umeme and Sharuk and that group there. But when I was moved to be house parents with the sisters, it was difficult for me at first, because I have a daughter that may be just a little older than you all are, but there was no mtoto structure like we had developed. And so she was where was McKinney? She was in Kalamazoo or something. She was somewhere, but she wasn't there because there were no other young ladies or women that were her age. And so she was the community babysitter, or the community, you know, she just couldn't handle it. But what I experienced was, I became you all's house parent when you were teenagers. You were going into womanhood, and all of you were extremely smart. That was the one thing I said. They were extremely intelligent young ladies, so they were extremely manipulative, you know. And each one of them had a different kind of personality. They weren't all the same. But what I gained from that is that the bonds that you develop as children or young ladies can last a lifetime. But it also helped me to understand that the way I grew up was, I grew up with some values that I would not have wanted to pass on to someone else. And I really tried hard to do that. I know Sharifa told me at Solace Recommitment, she said, I used to wonder, Bishop Ernesta, why you was always fussing. And she said, but now I have 2 daughters and I know why you were fussing. Because, you know, you had different personalities and sometimes those personalities gel. But I also saw a group of young ladies who went through a lot of different experiences. You know, Aida, your mother was diagnosed with lupus and you were always extremely concerned about that. And Nataleja's mother was here and there and the other. And, you know, it's just a whole lot of different things that were going on, and trying to be there for each one of you. Sometimes for me was a challenge. I'll be honest. It was a challenge because I'm like, it's 8 little women in here. They all come on their little cycles at the same time. They were going crazy at the same time and they were driving me crazy. But I think when I look at you all now, I am so proud of the women that you have become. Accomplished, well-spoken, still Black. I think that's the thing that best impresses me about all of you, that you still know who you are and whose you are. And I always felt that you all were never going to do exactly the same things that we did, but I always felt that you all would do great things. I really did. Even if I gave you a hard time, I still thought you were going to do great things. And I'm proud of what you have become.
So the sisterhood between, like, I know like a lot of the groups that they had in the shrine for women was to develop sisterhood. I don't know if you guys can speak to any of that, or just the dynamics between women growing up in the shrine with the different experience and developing sisterhood between each other.
Well, for me, going back to Akiba Land, that was not my personal experience, because when I joined, I was at delicate age that was too old to be Akiba Land, but not old enough to be basic training. And it was called student movement. And we don't talk about that a lot, but DJ, were you in student movement?
I think so.
Yes.
Right. So it was student movement. So it was my latter year of high school. And then I think in the church, we realized that our power was really from young people. Because when you're young, you're innovative, you're looking for things, you know, you want to do. Even though I didn't understand the dynamics of everything that was going on, I knew something wasn't right. Mm-hmm. I knew Black people weren't being treated fairly, you know, and I stumbled across the shrine at that time. I was 17 years old. I joined the student movement. But I'm listening to Evanescence. It's so much going on. The one thing I have to say about the shrine, and I will always say, there were relationships that were created in the shrine that you cannot compare to anywhere else.
That's true.
Even if you fell out, you agreed to disagree. But if any one of us will call on any one of us at any given time, no matter where we are, we will show up and show out. Mm-hmm. And that's still the case. Here we are 50 years later. You know, Neonu, DJ, Major Chikesha. It's like we always come through.
Right. And I think,
and
you know, when we were
that I have to say about our sisters, we always come through.
Yeah, and that was another thing, Nika, when we were in student movement together, you know, we would pile up in one car. I think Abdul had the car, and we would all pile up in his car and go from place to place. This is before they put limits on how many people you could cram into a car. we would go do our Kazi assignments, you know, but we did everything together. And then when we went to college cadre, we were still together. You know, we went out to college cadre. You know, that bond has been there, you know, from that point also.
Even Faida, your mom, I still call your mom Wayne.
Yeah.
I still call her Wayne, DJ Neon. I mean, there are some women here,
Over
without
50 years.
question, I would lay my life down for.
Mhm.
And that's because we've been in it together all these years. That's why we look so amazingly young. That's what struggle will do for you.
We had sister groups. I was in Nzinga for a very short time. And sometimes when I talk about I've been in church 51 years, and I have to look at the pros and the cons, of what helped make me what I am today. But I was in Nzinga for a little short period of time, and I remember the Nzinga, my Lord, and all that. But Nzinga was not my cup of tea. It just wasn't. But there were sisters in Nzinga that I bonded with, Amina Molokai, Almanada. We were all in there together. I think the thing that has impressed me when I joined the church back in '72, the first person I met was Monifa. And it was funny because she was, my birthday was the 19th of November, and I found out hers was the 20th, and we were born the same year. But I was always impressed by the connection and the bonding of the women in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Ways the sisters always seem to be on one accord. And I've developed relationships, much like you mentioned, Nyasha, that have gone over time and space. And Nika Tanae and I were roommates in Atlanta. We've had good times, and we yelled and screamed at each other, but we still have a connection. And what it has helped me to understand, even outside the boundaries of the church, is the empathy that is needed when we deal with our sisters. It's got to be there. When I was working for AT&T, I had a group of 19 people that reported to me, and most of them were young Black women. And so it was a professional kind of situation, but they had to be trained to be the positive aspect of what God meant them to be. You can't come in here with rollers in your head and with your house shoes on. You got to go home. We don't have a dress code. I have a dress code. You got to go home and change. So it made you look beyond just your family. It made you look to community and have a responsibility for anybody that came into your orbit who was of color and who you felt connected to. You had to, you just couldn't let people be a fool and not try to help them.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. We had, I thought about what Malika said, and kind of our group being, and I sort of related it to our group being a microcosm of the different personalities and things, and sort of types of people that you can run into, and I have run into, outside, especially at work. Now, just as you're stating, in that supervisory role, being able to not only lead but also change and relate and empathize and prop up where needed some folks, whereas others are, they can be more autonomous in their dealings, because you have learned how different people mesh, and just the idea of what group, what a team needs to look like in order to operate and function given a common goal. Yeah. We definitely in our group have different personalities, and we always lean on those things as resources, really. And certainly we tease each other at times, but it's also, again, a means of resource and relation, as we are like navigating, I just came across this new, sort of problem, or a friend of mine is going through this. Just ways to, again, really kind of sift through and our group being that sounding board to help us navigate different kind of problems. But but the but the group being that microcosm, I know you talked about Nzinga versus, you know, some of your personal connections, and that was us. Like there was our group, and then there was, you know, um other regions of M Total House, and then there was and as a youth group, and then as, you know, us within the church, how we're interacting with our own bio families versus our extended family. There were just so many sort of layers to how we were able to relate to each other, relate within the church, which I'm able to then reproduce in so many ways outside of the church. It's
You
interesting.
know, one of the things that I want to mention, by no stretch of the imagination did we have a relationship free of conflict. Let me make that clear, because you know, anytime you're dealing with women, you're dealing with men, you're gonna have some conflicts every now and then.
Absolutely.
And we had some of those as well. However, I will say that we had a language of conflict resolution. There was ways that we could talk about things. You know, we had different meetings or different strategies we used to try to work things out. But I never recall, now it may have happened, but I never recalled any knockout, drag out fights with sisters in the church over men. We were able to talk things out.
We have to laugh, don't we, fight?
It might have been a few. I wasn't a part of it. But you know, but a lot of times when we're talking, part of the honesty and the strength of the conversation is to put it out all out there, good, better, indifferent.
Right.
So it wasn't like it was a perfect, but we had ways to resolve things, and that was the difference.
Yeah.
And we were still able to be silver-minded, deal with each other, and function within the community with each other above and beyond our personal conflicts or disagreements.
When
And for me, when I came into the church, I was 16. So I was a part of Jael in Detroit. And right up to today, there's a couple of us, Uche Funa, me, and when we see each other, that bond is still there. And I have a great big bond with sisters now that's in the church over me and under me. So it's the church, we have a bond. I mean, I love my sisters in the church.
So for people that are joining, I'm sorry, we're just talking about honoring generational sisterhood and pairing of sisterhood. And if you want to chime in and join in and share how you know, the dynamics of the sisterhood in the shrine has affected you, feel free to chime in.
I think that our relationships, I agree with Nika Tanae. It ain't always been peaches and cream, you know, and we've experienced some extremes. But what it also helped me to appreciate is beyond our church walls, that we can look at organizations that try to work with sisters and women of color, like Black Girls Rock, all kinds of groups, step groups and stuff that try to bring our young sisters together to learn how to deal with each other. It's sad when we look out in the media and we see, you know, the ridiculousness of young sisters fighting and cutting and shooting each other. I mean, it's just crazy, because we learn that each one of us has a spark of inner divinity within us, and we are not going to always agree on every single thing. Nikki Tanae can tell you that. Even today, we have a Tuesday and Thursday meet call, and when you were talking, I was laughing because I said, we talk about everything from the Rudy to the booty. We talk about anything. There are no limits to what we can talk about, but we're not cookie cutters. You know, we all have our personalities and we all have our feelings about certain things, but when there's a point that we don't necessarily mesh with, we'll, instead of just being mad, we'll say, okay, we can agree to disagree on that and move on.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I wanted to chime in on that. It hasn't all been peaches and cream, but I will tell you this. I had an experience this past Thanksgiving where my sister, with the same mother and father, and her husband were sitting at the table, as well as sisters from the shrine. And my sister, who has the same maiden last name as me, she didn't understand. She really didn't. And I couldn't explain it either. But listening to us talk tonight, I think that part of it is that we majored on the majors instead of majoring on the minors. We had things that we disagreed upon. However, we all believed in what the church was doing. We would all profess that nothing is more sacred than the liberation struggle of Black people. And so when it came right down to it, we were trying to do something together. And even though we disagreed on this and we didn't necessarily sit on the same pew in every situation, in that big situation, we were all on the same team. And I think that is what forged a relationship that's unexplainable. And when I say unexplainable, I mean it. My sister was trying to figure it out. Like there was I think maybe a little tinge of jealousy, you know, but it's kind of hard to explain.
It was such a heartwarming experience for me last Saturday before last, when at Solace recommitment. I was like, I can't believe that all my girls are here together, you know, and they traveled from near and far to be there for their sister. And it was really a nice event. But what was more important to me was the camaraderie that you all had maintained. So, you know, I think the church has taught us that we each have value. We all have value. And so that, like somebody said, that value supersedes the petty differences. And if we can recognize the God in ourselves, then we can recognize the God in each other.
Man.
Does anybody else want to chime in? I know that we were talking about the difference. Neona, you chimed in about the difference between your, you know, your biological sister versus the sisters in the shrine. Does anybody else want to have any experience they want to share as far as like the sisterhood in the church versus their biological sisters or friendship?
I think my relationship in the church made me a better sister outside of the church. And because of the things that I learned in the church, how to forgive, how to communicate, how to resolve conflicts. It's the skill sets that I learned in the church made me a better person outside of the church.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, me personally, initially it was harder for me to make friends. I think I was like, oh, like this person's gonna be my friend and we're close and I'm sharing all this stuff. And then I realized that with the friendships I made, it wasn't quite the same values and they didn't treat me the same way that the sisters that I grew up with. And it was a hard lesson for me to realize that, you know, the way that I treated them and the stuff that I would put out was not the same thing that I would receive. So not saying that I have not had close friendships, but it has not quite been the same. I also don't have any biological sisters that I've grown up with. I just have two brothers. But I used to not want to go home on the weekends. I used to want to stay, you know, and have fun during the week. I'm sorry, like I did during the week. So it was, you know, it's definitely been a different experience, like trying to get sisters or friendships or stuff like that.
And I think jealousy is an issue. It is a real issue because it is something, there's a definite difference between confidence and conceit. And a lot of times when people see the confident women that were raised in the shrine, you know, they look at it in a negative light. They don't embrace our confidence more so than they look at it as conceit or jealousy, or our ability to handle ourselves more professionally, more adult-like. And a lot of times people misconstrue that with thinking that we think we're better than them. or whatever. Not looking at these experiences, we learn how to love ourselves. That's the most important thing. And when you're dealing with people that haven't learned how to love themselves, they have a hard time dealing with a person that experiences self-love. And what do you do about that? And so a lot of times they are jealous of our relationships. Even though we try to be bigger than that, it is what it is. But the relationships that we have in the church, we have them unapologetically. We worked on these relationships. They were developed through the years. We don't have to apologize for them. And like Neonu said, cannot explain them. So that can't be done. So if a person becomes jealous, I know this may sound cold, but that's their problem.
I think it's a very interesting distinction that you made, sort of categorically, like the declaration of like, oh, the difference is, love of oneself. It's like a very distinct sort of realization to have for yourself, and then for others to not know that, but and if thinking about Nyasha, what Nyasha was saying, like not being able to treat you the way you need to be treated just because you love your own self. I related to what Nyasha said in terms of like finding friends outside of this dynamic, mainly because I realize people are extreme in some of their beliefs and in some of their takes on things. So, for example, I really feel like we had a balance of, it's like Malika was saying, like we knew the value of our history, ourselves in history, and what we were trying to do. We had an understanding of Black history. We had an understanding of ourself in the world, all of those things very early on. But like meeting those same kinds of people, or people that are sort of reawakening to those things, they are really kind of extreme people as opposed to being more balanced like we were or felt like we were. And so, yes, you might be able to relate to that person on one thing, like they are woke, they are this, as opposed to they can also not be on the fringes of society. They're also able to just have, again, a balance. I feel like because we understood a lot of things early and we were exposed to those things early, there was the balance of, oh, okay, yes, there's this, but here's how to use it and apply it. And here's why it's going to make a difference. And this is how you need to now navigate the world because of this knowledge. This is why you need to pursue education. This is why you need to, walk into this space, and deal with people this way. Because again, knowledge and self-assuredness. A lot of people don't have that, I'm finding. And so I think being that people deal in those extremes and not have the balance of, oh, we were prepared earlier, we were knowledgeable early, and so these peaks and valleys that other people are having, we're not having to kind of go through. And it really makes a difference of how you relate to other people and how to develop friendships with other people.
There's a saying that gets floated around all the time. This says that when storms come in your life, it's not necessarily to cause havoc, but to cleanse it, to wipe away stuff, to allow for new things to come in. I think in our experiences in the church, for a lot of us older members, we've really learned the value of don't sweat the small stuff, don't sweat the small stuff. But with some of the younger sisters that came through Akiba Land, it's kind of difficult. I mean, I love all of you to death, but I was already a full-grown person when I joined the shrine. So a lot of the things that I went through, you all didn't have to experience because you had a different setting. But even within that, you were able to grasp the concept of who you are, whose you are, and walk in your own confidence. And I think that's what people see a lot of times from Sisters in the Shrine. You can walk into a setting and not know a soul in there. And if you tell them you from the Shrine of Black Madonna, they think you the Madonna that rolls up out the ground and stuff. You get a whole different sense of respect from people. I graduated from Southwestern in Detroit. And we started to have this monthly reunion. Now, I graduated from high school in 1967. I'm gonna tell my age because I'm proud. But whenever the person who put this reunion together introduces it, he said, and we got Vanessa Aida, y'all knew her as so-and-so, and she's with the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And then I get all kinds of questions and, oh, really? Because we elude a different kind of energy when you accept how God made you and that there's God in you, and you move in a different kind of energy. We're not perfect all the time, because I'll tell you, sometimes I'm the Tasmanian devil. I am. And I have to go to my knees and say, God, forgive me because I acted a fool today. But I always know that I can be better and to acknowledge the weakness and always try to work on the weakness.
Malika, I wanted to throw it to you really quick. I thought you had something to say.
Oh, I did. Oh, I wasn't sure you were going to repeat a question. Well, because this was kind of shifting gears a little bit, and I'm kind of asking a question of the group as well, if they can recall, because this is about generational sisterhood, if they can recall some of the relationships that they've had with women who weren't necessarily in their group. And I say that to say that one of the things that I also really valued is just kind of having mentors and women who were young women, but they still had wisdom and experience and lesson and love and light to pour into us, and so I'm thinking, I've known Onitara for decades now, and we weren't super close because, when I was a kid, because her sister, Nimako, her younger sister, was in my group. And so to me, Onitara was just like, she was too cool for school. Like she was just like, a big deal. But when I moved to New York, she happened to also be in Bed-Stuy at the time. And because she knew that I, grew up with her sister, she just kind of put me under her wing. And so even, outside of Atlanta, it was like, you could probably hit up any sister from the Shrine and you got somewhere to stay. Like we got a little Airbnb, a Shrine B&B going on, because she just made sure that I felt welcome in New York. So we would, have Easter together and Christmas. Like I felt like I was adopted, because some holidays it was just going to be too much, because I was in grad school at the time. It was going to be too much for me to go to Atlanta. So she would like, have me come over for the holidays. And even now, like we're on a group chat. And again, I think there's just something about being in a positive environment where it becomes embedded in you. And, it's just hard to find somebody who's a stranger if you've grown up and if you spent significant time in the church. So between Onitara and Alamaze, like I always had like these older sisters who continued to pour life into me if I'm, going through something. Or even they might sense, they'd be like, and and it's the older generation. I don't want to say that they old, it's the older generation. So they used to
okay.
call not just a text message. Like I will get a phone call like, Malika, what you doing? How you doing? Like, what's going on? And so to have those like real phone conversations, genuine, sincere relationships with the women who were, a generation ahead of me, like that's also like never going to disappear. That's always going to be with me.
I think that's a really good point, because I definitely have that experience with several sisters who I say this is like my big sister, because they were older than me, and I hate to say I did kind of follow their path. Like I looked up to, especially Onitara and Kamaria growing up. They were not in my group, but I wanted to be just like Kamaria. And I followed her from high school to college to LA. I just really, that's another person who called me and check on me all the time and stuff like that. But I would consider that as like my older sister, even though we were not in the same group and we were not the same age group. I do want to ask some of the mothers, what was it like to raise your daughter in the church? And basically, you gained an extra daughter, you gained your daughter gained an extra sister. If anybody wants to speak on that.
I
know for me,
who is that?
Dejanava,
Go ahead.
with Nefertiti, it was like, when she was born in a nursery in Atlanta. And it was like, at one point I worked in the nursery with all the children. And it was like, when she got potty trained, I was potty training the other kids as well, but it was once she had a group, it was like they were all my daughters. It wasn't like you differentiated between, because it was always, can my group come? And even to this day, she talks about, the group is coming over, or our group, we're going to do this. But it was a sense of, you had a larger family, that there was a connection between you, and you treated them the same way. Even when I became a teacher, I treated the students in my class like they were Keeperland. This is how I treat the group. This is what we do. But it was a blessing that she was able to have such relationships with other sisters in the church. To me, it was the most fulfilling thing to see my child in the midst of all the other children working and growing into becoming a strong Black woman.
And Neff was my roommate in college at one point too. That was like my little sister growing up. So that was definitely another person who was younger than me that I also was like, this is like my sister. So when we went to school, I was like, yo, this is my little sister. And introduced her to everybody I knew. Does anybody else want to share?
Well, my daughter, Duewa, she was born in the church as well. But one thing I always remember in the church, I know when we at first established Total House, I don't know how many of you guys remember this, but we were reading this book called Children of the Kibbutz. Mm-hmm. And basically in Children of the Kibbutz, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to be in the ballpark, but anyway, around 18 or whatever, if you children of the kibbutz they had to leave the kibbutz and they had to go out into the outside world, and they had to stay out there for at least a year before they could come back. Because when children are born into the church, they're there on their parents' commitment, not their own. But the whole idea of the kibbutz is when you come back, if you choose to come back, you came on your own. Mm-hmm. And you weren't there because your parents were there. You made your own commitment and not your parents' commitment. And I think about that even now with Duewa and some of the other Keeperland in Detroit, they have bonds that's, unbelievable. And some of them are 50 years old, 45 and 50, they still get together. And my daughter, it's different levels of a Keeperland, but they have started finding their way back together too. And that's the spiritual connection of the church that I've talked about that you just cannot explain. They are finding their way back to each other, even though they may have gone their separate ways and doing things. And even out in the world, when they do things, you still see their connection to their community and the choices that they make, the things that they do in the community. They have not, like Ebenezer said, forgot their Blackness. They know who they are. They come back to the community. And even as a teacher, because I'm a retired teacher, I would tell my children, no matter what you do, whatever choices you make, always come back to the community. Remember those who fed into you, who raised you, who gave you these things. Come back and give it back. And I'm seeing that with our kids. I don't say it with our children. And even when I look at you guys now, Aniyasha, Faida, Malika, you guys have found you're together. And to me, you are the living essence of everything that we represent. So we've done a good job, mommies, because our kids are still finding their way back together. And that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. And they found their way to give and they found their way to give in the spirit of excellence. You know, that's what I'm always amazed by. My daughter wasn't born in the church. McKinney, I think McKinney was 4 when I joined the church, and we didn't have an M-Toto house. We didn't have an M-Toto experience, and by the time we really kind of developed it, she was in Kalamazoo with General Chewy. I don't know how my child got to Kalamazoo, but she was in Kalamazoo. But when I look at, you know, Faida, Nyasha, all of them, Cam, all that little group that we had, I'm so proud to look at you all step out in excellence. In excellence. You ain't just half stepping and trying to be like whomever the person is. You ain't trying to be Beyonce, although I love Beyonce. You ain't trying to be Beyonce, or you ain't trying to be Meg Thee Stallion, or whoever is the thing right now. But in your own way, in your own field. When I hear about you, Malika, I know you didn't know me other than summer camp. But people always talk about, she's doing this and she wrote this and she said that. That's still a reflection of the energy, the positive energy that we gave out as women of the struggle. And it's going to be different. Your generation is not going to do what we did, because you're not supposed to. You're supposed to do something different and take it further. So you know, when Faida became Dr. Faida, I think I was crying more than her mama. I was like, oh, my baby, you know. But it's I don't know, it does something to your spirit to know that these young women that we raised, that we poured our hearts into, have turned out to be Madonnas of a whole different level. And the young children that they inspire, they come behind them. You know, the Nanyap, what's her name? Nanyapka that preach, what's her name's little daughter that does the poetry. I mean, they're coming behind with that same energy, but they look to you all like we look to the older women when we were young. We were like 21, 22. We looked at the DFAs and the Carolyn Kilpatrick and all of them. They were our examples. So it's good to know that we made a positive contribution in more ways than I think that we can ever realize.
And my girls, Jedi and Marini, they were born at Shrine 10, but we came back to Detroit and it was a space. So when I went back to the church, they were like 13 and 14. But that bond seemed like they still clicked. Tahina, Monifa, and all of them. Even with Atlanta sisters, some Houston sisters, you know, and right now they bond. It wasn't many of them, but they connect. And I asked me about Nyasha and Faida, you know, Marine. They asked me, so they still got that bond. You know, like you said, they may have went that way or that way, but they're still together.
Somebody asked in the chat room, some of our younger women, Nyasha, Malika, like, what are you doing now? What's your career now?
I'll go because I also I'm gonna have to step off the call, but I'm the senior news and politics editor at Essence. And you know, speaking of sisterhood, it just, I think I've gotten accustomed to being in Black spaces and positive Black spaces. And so for me, it was like, whatever I do, and I think it's because we were taught that the liberation of our people was the most sacred, and that we had to prioritize that in our lives. Like whatever I did, I knew, you know, even in undergrad, I needed to have a career that poured into Black people. I needed to have a career where we could raise our consciousness, where we could meet our folks where they are. And so I ultimately knew wherever I worked, I needed to be with Black people. And so I started off as a lawyer. I was an attorney for almost a decade. Oh my God, it's been almost a decade already. So I was an attorney for several years, also, you know, trying to focus on social justice issues. And then I transitioned into talking about reporting on those, editing those kinds of stories for Essence Magazine. So y'all pick up Essence. Make sure I keep it
I
alive.
get assets.
And is there anything? Oh, I'm working and I'm writing a book. So I'm going to be back in the Midwest. I was living in the Midwest for a while. Speaking of like the Shrine, I needed to do some research in Detroit. I stayed in the training center because Jerry Mojo was like, "You need somewhere to stay." Like, stay here. This was a few years ago. So I'm working on a book. It's coming out in October, and then I'm working on another one. So, you know, just trying to keep it moving.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead, Nayamka. I think that's Nayamka that wanted to share.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Okay, well, it's hard to follow my sister Malika now. She all over the place.
Bye, Nan.
But me and Malika actually did grow up, and just to piggyback off of some of the conversation, I think you all did a remarkable job raising us, molding us, helping us become who we are. I am not who I am without the Shrine, without my brothers and sisters in the Keeperland, without the house mothers who poured into me. But yeah, just some of the stuff I'm doing now. I just got out of coaching. I was coaching college basketball for 9 years, and I just started my own business, which is still connected to coaching, non-for-profits. I work with teams, groups, and organizations to kind of help pretty much professional development, team building. I do core practices as well. So again, the Shrine is in us. It has never left. It is a big reflection of us. I like what Malika said. She specifically picked a degree that directed her to her people. And I kind of picked something that would still help me with young people, which is a big part of what the church was, making sure young people progress, making sure young people become their best self. And we are the reflection of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Nan. Thank you, Malika. Faida, Dr. Stokes.
He giggles when we say that. I don't know why.
That's still hilarious to me. Same. I couldn't shake just the idea of helping others, and so certainly I built sort of foundational pieces in social work, in nonprofit management, and casework. From there, I moved over to education because being in social services, a lot of the work can be very draining and not as fulfilling because you want so much for the children and they can't help their circumstances. As a matter of fact, the whole premise behind Child and Protective Services is that you're protecting children that would have otherwise not been protected because of family dynamics. So I actually think in the church we have vocational opportunities. So for myself, I had a vocational opportunity in the kitchen, vocational opportunities in carpentry with Kamal certain summers. Like there are a lot of things that we were exposed to. And so I kind of realized early on that like I knew a lot of stuff about a lot of things, just like random stuff. And just the to have that education that it gives you access. And I wanted other kids to have that. I wanted them to understand the power of that education. And so I moved into education, working with students with special education needs specifically. And I really did a deep dive into that, where I looked further into how they even came into meeting eligibility. So I moved from the classroom to evaluation and assessment of special education. Then the law that comes with that. And from there, did several different internships, several different things, but sort of leaning on self-regulation, leaning on education as a core, and leaning on the foundations of literacy really kind of propelled me into working on additional degrees, specifically a doctorate, um, to understand the best strategies in helping children fill their toolbox and arming themselves for the world, because our kids really need to be armed for the world. So I just recently I realized my anniversary date for my doctor was St. Patrick's Day weekend. It was 2020. We were going through COVID, and I was able to get on campus and defend my dissertation, which was really good because I had worked really hard on it. So it's been a couple of years, and I'm now in administration in a local school district in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I'm still on the special education side of administration, and coordinating speech services, coordinating OT, PT, in-home parent training for students, licensed professional counselors. I'm supervising all of those folks. And so I'm ensuring, I'm working on the advocacy side of ensuring that we're doing our part and maintaining integrity, as parents will hold us to the fire of serving students. And so I really enjoy that work. I'm positioned right now to do this a couple of years, and then I'll figure out another way to just again continue that core piece of education, but just on a larger scale. I've written a couple of articles. A lot of things are about, again, self-regulation. A lot of things are about strategies that are significant for students who struggle and need interventions, and aren't learning on that traditional trajectory. And so that I'm just keeping that as my core, and any opportunity I have to blend in other things, other experiences, I certainly don't back down from those opportunities.
So proud of you. Thank you, Faida.
May I ask a really quick question?
Of course.
Okay. Thank you, guys. You guys have done a wonderful job, young ladies. Dr. Faida, if you wouldn't mind, can you share your email and or phone number in the chat? I'd love to connect with you regarding some of your work in self-regulation with children.
Not that.
Is she still there? Oh,
She just put it in the chat.
you disappeared. I didn't see you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I do want to also mention that there will be an alumni reunion in August of this year in Atlanta, Georgia. And if you would like to find out more details, stay tuned for the website. It will be at KeeblelandAlumni.org, where you can find out more news. And then also, if you keep in contact with the Shrine Facebook page and the Keebleland Alumni Facebook page for any news. And does anybody have any last thoughts they would like to share? Because if not, we're going to wrap it up tonight.
Well, what is Nyasha doing these days?
Oh, so I'm not gonna I'm gonna keep it short. So I'm not gonna say that I went into the field to with Black women in mind. I think I was just not having a TV in a group house a lot of times. I was always making television. So I did go into production and TV producing and doing more specifically, the latest is court television, but it's Judge Steve is the show that I'm currently on. It is prime time, but the new season will not be premiering until September on ABC if you guys want to tune in. But that is what I have been doing out in California, guys. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Also, I do want to say, I don't know if everybody has said thank you to our house mothers, to our older sisters, just the women who have raised us or indirectly raised us or given us advice. People that have helped me get into college that I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I do want to say thank you. People who have comforted me when I have been crying or going through a heartbreak, whatever. I do want to say to all the women of the Shrine, thank you. I definitely wouldn't be where I am or who I am without you. So thank you. And
thank you, Dasha, for inviting me to this panel. Bishop Benta did a lot. She was very strategic and a lot of sort of exposure, specifically about women's health. We had several just unforgettable, unbelievable experiences about, we talked about how we are so self-assured, and that doesn't come without knowledge. And if you haven't learned by now, I'm going to pepper in the word knowledge and education as much as possible because that's my jam. But she was so instrumental where my mother may have not done due to, there were other obligations, but she made it a point to talk to us about, our health, how to learn about ourselves again, so that we can take care of ourselves because no one else will take care of you like you. And so just even down to how to do self-love. So early pampering of each other and ourselves, and just moving into internal processes, just all of those things intertwined. Bishop Benta was one of our house mothers who really just started that conversation, I recall specifically. So thank you to Bishop Benta.
As embarrassing as it was when we were kids, it is something that I appreciate now. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to add on. I think it was Anika Tene that mentioned the Keyblade coming back together, if I'm not mistaken, and just the magnitude of that book for what we became, because most of the adults in the church, their life has been dedicated not only to the liberation of Black people, but to the liberation of the Black youth. So just to see where we are today, but I like that you all were intentional about it. Akibaland also raised Akibaland too. You had some of, Bakiba, Rakiba, people in Detroit, a lot of them came back, Keanu, they all came back and became eventually our YTG group leaders, our group leaders at some point. Natambu, I remember a lot of people who might have been maybe six or so, 10 years older than me, who still were a big part of what Akibaland was in Detroit. And I'm sure that occurred in other regions as well. So just wanted to, just re-emphasize that it was very intentional. I can't say enough about how appreciative it has been just for all of us. And we're making, like you said, we're making our way back to each other. A lot of us haven't been separated, but life has been lifing, and it's allowing us to actually, come back together and really reconnect our bond. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Nanyamka. All right, so this has been another Woke Wednesday, hosted by the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and we were again talking about honoring generational sisterhood and the pairing of sisterhood in the shrine. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. I believe there will be a recording if you guys want to share on your social media later. But other than that, I'm going to say kwaheri. You guys have a good night, and I will see you guys later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for doing this.
Yeah.
You're quite welcome. I couldn't see
Hey,
everybody.
Faida.
Hey.
Dr. Faida.
I know we were going to hear Chakesha before we left.
Hey, Shakesha, I hope your son is doing good from his surgery too.
Oh, yes, he is.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
thank you. Yes.
Mhm.
Hi, guys.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Dr. Faida.
Bye.
Love
Hey,
y'all.
hey, I didn't even see you on there.
What's that, my ear?
Hey, Mona.